socialite, free spirit, egomaniac, wheelchair thief. Princess Margaret was a lot of things, but she certainly wasn't boring. The Countess of Snowdon loved living the life of a party princess, but only on her own terms. As a result, she could often come off as brusque or rude. In Princess Margaret, a biography, one individual recalled, "I have been at the same house parties as her, and her arrogance, her petulance, her rudeness, and her plain bad manners were awful." Margaret also enjoyed using royal etiquette to her advantage. One rule stated that a meal couldn't begin until she arrived, for example, and Margaret often kept people waiting for her. In Paris in 1959, Margaret forced her guests to wait for her at a party held in her honor, and some of them were less than pleased about it. Writer and aristocrat Nancy Mitford wrote in her book Love from Nancy, "Dinner was at 8:30, and at 8:30 Princess Margaret's hairdresser arrived, so we waited for hours while he concocted a ghastly coiffure. She looked like a huge ball of fur on two well-developed legs." Princess Margaret often ruffled the feathers of the British upper class by rubbing shoulders with celebrities who were considered to exist far below her station. At the time, it was thought that royals needed to maintain a healthy distance from the artistic elite, lest they become viewed as celebrities themselves. But Margaret couldn't help but be drawn to the world of actors and artists, and vice versa. Andy Warhol used her likeness in his artwork. John Betjeman cried when he met her, and John Fowles fantasized about her in his diary. Yet none of these artists admired Margaret quite so much as Pablo Picasso. Even from afar, Picasso developed a tremendous crush on the princess. The painter was so smitten by her, in fact, that he spent years plotting the perfect marriage proposal. He even told his biographer, John Richardson, to dress as a herald for the big moment. Richardson would later remember, "If we didn't have the right clothes, Picasso would make them for us. Cardboard top hats, or would we prefer crowns?" When Richardson later crossed paths with Margaret, he decided to share this anecdote with her, and it didn't go well. As Richardson recalled, "She was outraged. She said she thought it's the most disgusting thing she had ever heard." Don't tell Pablo Picasso, but Princess Margaret allegedly engaged in affairs with a number of celebrities over the years, such as Peter Sellers and David Niven. She also had an 8-year romance with Peter O'Toole, whom she first met in 1965, 5 years after she'd married Anthony Armstrong Jones.
Nothing is written.
The princess was also said to be linked to gangster-turned-actor John Bindon. Their relationship reportedly began in 1970 when Bindon and his then-girlfriend, fellow actor Vicky Hodge, attended one of Margaret's parties on the island of Mustique. According to Hodge, Margaret supposedly asked to see his genitals to confirm some rumors she'd heard. Hodge later remembered, "Then he took out his appendage. The princess examined it rather like a fossil." We all gasped. Margaret would deny having any sort of affair with Bindon, of course, but she was spotted with him in Mustique on at least one other occasion. Many of the artists living in Margaret's day would have jumped at the chance to receive recognition from a British royal. Unfortunately for them, it appears that Margaret was quicker to dish out insults than praise. Take, for example, film producer Robert Evans, who traveled to England for a special royal screening of his film, Love Story.
"Love means never having to say you're sorry."
Both the Queen Mother and Princess Margaret attended the event. As Evans later recalled, "All of us stood in a receiving line as Lord Somebody introduced us one by one to Her Majesty and her younger daughter. It was a hell of a thrill, abruptly ending when the lovely princess shook my hand." Apparently, though, Margaret outright told him that her husband had already seen the film and, in her words, hated it. Evans says he immediately thought to himself, "You too." Even Hollywood royalty couldn't escape Princess Margaret's bad manners. In his biography of the princess's life, Craig Brown described an incident in which Margaret insulted Elizabeth Taylor's extravagant jewelry. He said, after Richard Burton presented Taylor with the huge Krupp diamond, Princess Margaret remarked to a friend that it was the most vulgar thing I've ever seen. Anyone in Margaret's entourage would have let this comment slide, but Taylor was less willing to put up with her antics. When she was made aware of this insult, she set out to embarrass the princess right back. As Brown wrote, a while later the two women met at a party. Taylor was wearing the diamond and asked Margaret if she would like to try it on. Margaret slipped it on her finger. "Doesn't look so vulgar now, does it?" observed Taylor. This wasn't the only time that Taylor put Margaret in her place either. Famous for always running behind schedule, the actor apparently arrived late to meetings with both Margaret and Queen Elizabeth II. Rumor had it that Taylor once made Elizabeth wait for 20 minutes, while Margaret was kept waiting for a full half hour. It seems that Elizabeth Taylor didn't just think that Princess Margaret was rude, she also found her quite boring. One evening at Kensington Palace, the princess apparently insisted on singing and playing the piano for her party guests. As per usual, nobody was allowed to go home until Margaret had her fun. Evidently, this particular show went on into the wee hours. Taylor, who was part of this captive audience, was hardly charmed by the princess, and she soon began to nod off. A furious Margaret is said to have seethed. Is anyone going to take her home? Or we'll have to find a sleeping bag. Being the generous spirit that she was, Margaret often offered the spotlight to others. In his book, Princess Margaret, a Biography, royal expert Theo Aronson described an incident that took place between Margaret and Judy Garland. He explained, at a party at the Beverly Hills Hotel, Her Royal Highness sent a message across the room to say that she would like to hear Miss Garland sing. The singer was appalled, both by this trivializing of her talent and by the princess's lordly tone. Never one to be coerced into singing for a room full of guests, Garland reportedly fired back. Tell her I'll sing if she christens a ship first. Now that's a comeback.
I'm melting! Melting! Oh, what a world! What a world!
Not every celebrity found Princess Margaret so unappealing. On one occasion, the English actor Rupert Everett hoped to enjoy a special evening out with a princess. Things soon went awry, though, when Everett failed to pick up on his companion's signals. When they were at Kensington Palace, before leaving for the theater, Margaret took out a cigarette and waited patiently for Everett to light it for her.
So I was chatting and going on. And then the lady in waiting was looking at me too, and there was this Rolex lighter on the table. I just didn't realize I was meant to light it.
Things quickly went from bad to worse. Rather than pick up on Margaret's cues, Everett thought he was being offered a gift by the princess.
So then I suddenly thought she was asking me if I wanted a cigarette. So I said, oh, don't mind if I do. And I lit my cigarette.
Everett's gaffe disgusted Margaret, who had hoped to receive the princess treatment from her guest, not the other way around. Princess Margaret found happiness on Mustique during the later years of her life. She loved the island's festive atmosphere, rustic charm, and its considerable distance from the prying eyes of the British tabloids. But if the princess enjoyed her time on Mustique, it was because her hosts worked overtime to give her the royal treatment. Lady Anne Glenconner and her husband, Colin Tennant, 3rd Baron Glenconner, often brought fresh water to the beach so that the princess could rinse off after her swim. They would also do everything in their power to keep the whiskey flowing without end. As Tatiana Copeland, who once threw a party attended by the princess, told Town & Country, you had to make sure you had famous grouse whiskey when she came to your house. Apparently, if you failed to supply Margaret with her drink of choice, you became persona non grata to the princess, as Copeland recalled. If you couldn't be bothered to know what she liked to drink, she probably wouldn't be bothered to come back to you. Of course, all this pampering required a lot of hard work. Nicholas Courtney told Craig Brown that one year, Colin could barely get a minute's rest. He explained, he collapsed with exhaustion when Princess Margaret left the island. He put every ounce of energy into making it fun for her. Although Margaret was a lifelong party girl, that doesn't mean she didn't believe in the hierarchy of monarchy. At parties, this meant blending casual fun with traditional titles. For example, she required everyone, including her husband, to publicly refer to her as Princess Margaret. As she partied away on the island of Mustique, she demanded that all the other residents there refer to her using the term Her Royal Highness, even on nights out. According to some sources, Margaret would quite happily spoil the fun if anyone forgot to use her titles. As some members of her inner circle told El País, she could be very wild and unrestrained, and she could be very difficult. She liked to be spoiled and taken care of. If she felt well cared for, she was fun. That said, it has been reported that Margaret allowed some of her closest companions to use special nicknames. During their marriage, Anthony Armstrong Jones reportedly called her Ducky, albeit only within the confines of their home. Meanwhile, her best friends were permitted to call her Ma'am Darling, as opposed to just Ma'am. Princess Margaret liked to have fun, and getting trapped in a dull conversation was anything but that. Luckily, she always had an escape plan. Margaret enlisted Lady Anne Glenconner to rescue her from uninteresting conversations and direct her to better guests.
We always wanted her to enjoy herself.
And by appointing Glenconner as her lady-in-waiting, Margaret was sure to have her social gatekeeper with her at all times. Years later, Glenconner wrote for Newsweek, at a cocktail party or dinner, I'd find people that Princess Margaret wanted to meet and bring them over and introduce them. I had to gauge when the timing was right. If she was having a fascinating talk with somebody, I didn't want to butt in with a new person. On the flip side, if Margaret wasn't having a good time, Glenconner knew that she should present the princess with a new conversation partner. But how did she know whether or not Margaret was sufficiently entertained? As she wrote, "I had to assess whether she was enjoying the conversation. A lot of that was down to eye contact." It's hardly a secret that Princess Margaret could be petulant and hard to please, and no one understood this better than her own family. In public, Margaret often invoked her rank to get her way. In private, though, she never hesitated to insult even those who outranked her. Rumor has it that she once offended her mother by calling her home, the Castle of May, a horrible place. Elizabeth apparently reacted by snapping, "Well, darling, you needn't come again." Perhaps most bizarrely of all, Margaret once argued with Queen Elizabeth II over a wheelchair that was supposed to take the Queen Mother to a royal engagement. As royal expert Craig Brown wrote in his biography, Mayhem Darling, Margaret felt that the wheelchair should have been hers, as she was still recovering from burns she'd sustained from a particularly hot bath. Brown wrote, "The Queen had seen to it that a footman would have a wheelchair ready for her mother, but as the lift doors opened onto the first floor, Margaret made a dash for it. The younger Elizabeth was very much not amused though, exclaiming, 'For God's sake, Margaret, get out! That's meant for mommy.'"
While there's no question that the royal lifestyle is a glamorous one, Princess Margaret's daily routine definitely took the concept of luxury to the next level. Craig Brown's biography, Mayhem Darling, 99 Glimpses of Princess Margaret, describes the Countess of Snowdon's morning as truly indulgent. Reportedly, the princess would initially wake up at 9 a.m. for breakfast in bed, followed by 2 hours in bed listening to the radio, reading the newspapers, which she invariably left scattered over the floor, and chain smoking. Per the biography, Margaret would then enjoy an hour-long bath at 11 a.m., after which she would do her hair and makeup before getting dressed for the day. Brown wrote, "As one would imagine of a princess, she never wore any of her clothes more than once without having them cleaned." Then at 12:30 p.m., it would be time for her vodka pick-me-up. Afterward, the princess would eat a 4-course lunch downstairs, complete with fruit, an array of cheeses, and a half bottle of wine. As a member of the British royal family, there was always plenty of attention on Princess Margaret. According to The Sun, the Countess of Snowdon was known for her controversial behavior. She was reportedly nasty to various members of her staff, as well as her own family members. Notably, the outlet recounted the words of Sir Roy Strong, who was a frequent guest at the princess's dinner parties. In his diary, Strong reflected on the royals' public image, noting that in the 60s, Margaret's attitude wasn't widely known to the masses. She was even well received in the United States.
"I've longed to come to this country for ages,"
Strong wrote. If she had died in the middle of the 1960s, the response would have been akin to that on the death of Diana. As it was, she lived long enough for the bitter truth about her to become general knowledge. The way she behaved was so inconsiderate that I really couldn't stand any more of it. Similarly, it was reported that Princess Margaret once snapped at a pregnant woman for trying to sit down, saying, "One does not sit before royalty sits." She also allegedly vetoed an Indian guest from one of her events because she didn't like Indians. If that wasn't bad enough, she once reportedly told a disabled man, "Have you ever looked at yourself in the mirror and seen the way you walk?" While Margaret became quite infamous for her love of socializing, there were plenty of times when she grew tired of some of her own guests' behaviors. Per Evening Standard, the princess's now ex-husband, photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones, stated years after the fact that he and Margaret used to have a neat trick for keeping themselves busy when she became bored by the guests' conversations during dinner parties. According to Armstrong Jones, the royal couple would play what they called the bread game. Whenever one of the dinner attendees said something cliched, either Margaret or Armstrong Jones would rip off a piece of bread and move it toward the middle of the table. At the end of the dinner, the person with the most pieces would be considered the winner. The outlet added that the whole point of the couple's shenanigans was to poke fun at the silly exchanges from dinner guests without anyone else being aware of what they were doing. As the younger sibling to the British monarch, Margaret was reportedly quite spoiled by her parents, and unlike her sister, she didn't face the same pressure to be on her best behavior. Considered by some to be unnecessarily rude, Honey stated that one of the Countess of Snowdon's notable encounters was her meeting the iconic English supermodel Twiggy in the mid-1960s.
So does Twiggy remember
You're making your own love.
According to the outlet, the incident occurred at a London dinner party during which Margaret was seated next to the famous model. Though plenty of fashionistas would have likely been overjoyed at the chance to chat with Twiggy, Honey reported that writer Julie Miller stated that the princess wasn't impressed by her dinner companion. Additionally, Miller also claimed that she ignored the supermodel for 2 whole hours before ever attempting to engage with her. Allegedly, when the Countess of Snowdon finally spoke, she began by asking Twiggy, "Who are you?" To which the model replied, "I'm Leslie Hornby, ma'am, but people call me Twiggy." Margaret replied, "How unfortunate," before going back to ignoring Twiggy and doing so for the rest of the night. There were plenty of other celebrities who received brutal treatment from the Countess of Snowdon, including some of Hollywood's most dazzling stars. Honey noted that Margaret made a bold comment about actor Grace Kelly, allegedly telling her upon their meeting, "You don't look like a movie star." Another one of the princess's controversial celebrity interactions happened in 1986, when actor Rupert Everett joined the Countess of Snowdon and her staff for a night at the theater. The actor claimed she was like the Red Queen in Alice in Wonderland. Everett also stated that the princess told him he had marvelous legs and kept referring to him as Leggy.
Anyway, she said, "Come on, Leggy." She started calling me Leggy.
Though Margaret had a reputation for being the life of the party, her glamorous lifestyle also included some vices that ultimately led to serious health issues. According to The Sun, the Countess of Snowdon was known to enjoy vodka, scotch, and whiskey, in addition to her chain-smoking habit, which reportedly included smoking up to 60 cigarettes a day.
I don't like the sound of that cough.
It's fine.
And you've been struggling with your chest for a while.
In January 1985, Margaret had a part of her left lung removed due to a cancer scare. The tissue was later reportedly found to be non-malignant. After the procedure, the royal's ex-husband, Anthony Armstrong Jones, publicly stated that he was very relieved that everything went all right and that it was not something serious, per The Sun. Despite the scare, the Countess of Snowdon continued her smoking habit, rejecting advice from doctors and family members to quit. However, she supposedly cut her daily usage in half. Later, in 1992, Margaret came down with a feverish cold and was hospitalized with pneumonia months later. Although she ultimately recovered, the princess would later suffer from multiple strokes and eventually have a peaceful passing in 2002 after experiencing cardiac issues following one last stroke, according to Express. There's no question that Margaret lived a glamorous life that was filled with plenty of memorable moments and events, one of which was her romance with RAF Group Captain Peter Townsend. As noted by Town & Country, numerous reports stated that Townsend initially met the teen princess when he applied to work for her father, then King George VI. Townsend later recalled their meeting, saying Margaret was as unremarkable as one would expect of a 14-year-old girl. However, they would later become romantically involved 8 years later when the Countess of Snowdon was 22, with a 16-year age gap separating the two lovers. While the pair tried to keep their relationship private, the media continued to report on the speculation surrounding the duo, fueling the rumors of the royal romance. But ultimately, it was the couple's wish to tie the knot that led to a public conflict. According to the outlet, Townsend's prior divorce in 1952 disqualified him from being able to marry the princess. Then, in 1955, the government announced that if the princess wished to wed Townsend, she would lose all of her royal privileges, including paid expenses. That same year, Margaret gave a public statement saying that she would put her royal duties before her personal life and would not marry Townsend. After her romance with Captain Peter Townsend officially ended, Margaret began a relationship with Anthony Armstrong Jones. The pair first met in 1958, and after getting her family's approval, the pair's engagement was announced on February 26, 1960. They were married on May 6, 1960, in the first televised royal wedding.
He is everything that sort of goes against royal protocol. He is extremely fun-loving. He is a bohemian.
The couple initially appeared to be happy during the early years of their marriage and even had 2 children. However, their similar personalities ultimately led to friction between the formerly blissful pair, and from there, both began to reportedly have affairs with other people. In 1976, the royal couple separated and officially divorced 2 years later. However, despite the clear problems during their marriage, it was reported that the former couple remained good friends. According to The Sun, some of the Countess of Snowdon's most memorable love affairs were with celebrities. These famous flings reportedly included actor Peter Sellers and actor and novelist David Niven. She also had an 8-year love affair with actor Peter O'Toole, who she initially met in 1965. Margaret was said to have started the relationship with O'Toole 5 years after she had married Anthony Armstrong Jones. O'Toole later spoke out about the pair's affair, claiming that when the couple wasn't getting intimate, they would bathe together in a tub filled with scented water and flowers. With her controversial behavior, her string of affairs, and her love for a good party, it's no surprise that Princess Margaret had plenty of headline-making moments throughout her life. As noted by Town & Country, one of the princess's suggestive photographs was recreated in Netflix's popular series, The Crown. However, the outlet stated that the television portrayal wasn't exactly true to life. In the series, Vanessa Kirby's Margaret has a steamy moment with Armstrong Jones, played by actor Matthew Goode, during which she poses for a photograph. While the show certainly created a heart-racing moment between the pair, the outlet says that in reality, the picture was actually the Countess of Snowdon's 29th birthday portrait. Still, Town & Country stated that the image ultimately captures the intimate sense of the original. Additionally, according to Express, The Crown also recreated a second real-life scandalous photo of the princess that, while similar, wasn't exactly accurate. This picture is of Margaret's infamous bathtub photo, which appeared in the Netflix drama's 3rd season, with Helena Bonham Carter's Margaret posing in a bubble-filled tub, wearing nothing but a tiara on her head. The actual photo, however, was taken by Armstrong Jones 3 years earlier, not another photographer, and there were also no bubbles in the picture.